Hi guys, welcome back. Today we're going to start on some of the most involved testing that we've done on the channel so far. Now this is my newly acquired XTI 50. We've been using the old one with the old logo and stuff on it for 18 months now. We have a very good idea how that performs. However, this one I've got no information whatsoever, and I want to try and use it in my upcoming winter bench rest league. So what we're going to do today, we're going to start on some pellet testing. Yes, we are going to clamp this one up. Not quite sure how we're going to make that work yet, but we're going to do the same sort of clamped rig testing that we did with the Anschutz 9015. We also need to start making a map of how this performs as the temperatures drop. So I've also now got, I don't wish to brag, but my new phone has got a little thermometer in the back of it, an infrared thermometer. So I've managed to get a scope and an air cylinder temperature combined with the air temperature, so we can start building a map of how this performs if the pellet speed fluctuates, as it probably will do. And on top of that, I want to try and see if we can set it up to use a specific batch of pellets. Now these are the JSB Exact Expresses. I've had these for years. I'll give you a picture of the batch code, but they're from 2016, so you're probably not going to find any more of them. But these are also the pellet that the 9015 shoots the best in its clamped configuration. Now, these are a terrible pellet out in the wind, but I'm shooting Winter League indoors on the bench rest circuit. So I'm hoping, well, that's the plan. At least we want to see if we can set this up. Maybe we can fine tune this to run these. Now, we know these are a good pellet. We've seen the results from the 9015. Is it possible that we can tune a rifle that we know nothing about to suit a specific pellet that we do know is a good one? We've got an awful lot to go through, so I'm going to quickly just bring it onto a zero, make sure we're all safe, and then we'll get the clamp rig out, shall we? See how it goes. Right, first off then, just a quick zero check. You can see on the middle of the card up here, I've just got a couple of additional red circles in the middle of the card. So I've had this apart since I got it, but all I've done is taken the air cylinder off and Scotch-Brighted it. When I got it, it was all marked up and scuffed. It was a demo job. So I've just given that a good clean up. The scope's been on and off, so we don't know at all how close it's going to be to a zero. So quickly, safely bring it onto a zero, then we're going to chrono it, get some actual speed readings, because throughout this test today and overnight, I'm going to take it to the club tonight, the temperature's going to be getting progressively colder, so we want to keep a note and we want to make a note of how the speed changes. Of course, as it cools down, this is likely to slow down as well. So you can see I'm a bit more supportive than normal at the moment. Oh, it's bang on the centre line, that's good. I was actually aiming for the one that was, we've landed between two circles. I was aiming for the lower one. The interesting thing with this action, we've got full control over all of the power. We can get to the hammer on this one. I can also adjust the reg as well. But we've also got the air stripper on top of that. So there's an awful lot that we can do to try and fine tune this. Right, you watch, this will probably move. I've just given that about 30 clicks. Bearing in mind that's 8th MOA, so much finer clicks on this than most of my other scopes have. Okay, I'm going to turn you off. I'm going to leave that one on. Right, let's get this chronoed quickly. I don't know whether you can see that or not. Sometimes that camera really struggles to film the phone, but I'll call them out as we go. Now, the temperature's actually dropping. It's a little over 7 degrees now, so it's already come down 1.5 degrees in the last 20 minutes. 8, 11. Right, what we can do, I can shoot a bunch of these. This has actually got new software. This new Nate Crony's got new software on the phone, so we can actually plot it into a nice little graph. What I'll do, I'll screenshot that, and then we can set it up. We can put the temperature on there, so we can start mapping. $8.13. We want to drop it from there, I think, a little bit. $8.13.95. We've got much finer scaling actually now on this chrono readout than my old Nate Crony. It's going to be pretty cool to put it into a graph as well. 8.14. 11.6. Now the temperature's dropping. We've definitely got a bit to play with. I think we want to pitch this down to under 800 feet per second. So I think what we'll do in a moment, I'll show you this card that I've just shot. Because it's not a bad little card as it goes. It would certainly be a 250 if you were shooting World's Rules. You'd probably end up scoring 100 with, I don't know, a little bit choppy, but we'll have a better look at that in a second. Let's have a quick nose at this. Spread 5.12, standard deviation 1.68 feet per second, average 813, minimum 810, maximum 815. So 5 feet per second over 10 shots in the cold. Right, so that's about exactly the same as what the 9015 does then, about the same spread through a tin. If we were to break these down, if we were to sort them by weight and size, which I will do eventually, we can bring this down even tighter than that. So that's a pretty good start. We've got chrono data, we've got temperature data, bit of a scruffy card though. So that's the card that we've just got. I'll do a nice close up. We've got quite a few X's on here, but a couple of these, it was a bit strange. I had a couple in a row that dropped a little bit low. Now, whether that was just my wobbliness, obviously I'm on a little back bag here, but it's not the most stable of things. Whether it was a power related drop, unlikely looking at that chrono string there, so probably pellets or a little bit of wind down the end, but not bad, but we need to do an awful lot better than that. The plan is to get that to knock out all of these red diamonds for at least 10 shots in a row, because I'm shooting in SRA, 10 shots off the back of my hand, out of the shoulder. I need to be doing 10 X's really. Right, let's move this all around and get cracked on. Right, for you of you that haven't seen it, this crusty looking thing, it's got a bit damp since we last used it. It's my clamping rig. It weighs just over £100. It's pretty solid. Now, since the last video that we used it in, the feet are now slightly more robustly fixed into this great big steel plate. We've got a little bit more adjustment on here, but I am a little bit concerned about this because at the moment I've got the lower portion of an Aliotech chassis here, so we've got no shock absorption whatsoever. When we had the Anschutz in here, I had a mounting block that was made out of laminate, and it was mounted into that sort of portion of woodwork, exactly how the Anschutz would have bolted into a stock. At the moment, we've got no shock absorption whatsoever, so I'm a little bit concerned that it may not necessarily work. Now, you can see the target down there. Because of the weight and the size of this rig, it's actually easier to move the card, so that beige card is the proper target card, the short fibre stuff. So we should be able to shoot a couple of nice groups on there. And the temperature's dropped a bit as well, so let's see how it goes. Point of impact slightly different. That's interesting. And then of course I can see down there with the scope, I've got quite a lot of stuff on my back card there. I can see that this moves just ever so slightly. It's only a fraction of a millimetre. In fact, it's way less. The actual movement is less than the thickness of this fine reticle stadia. The sight picture is actually a little bit jumpy. I can feel the vibration through here. Maybe we need to look at some sort of buffer, a shock absorber. Right, so we'll just do a little 5-shot group there. To be honest, that looks exactly the same really as the group I shot off the bags. If we was to pick 5 targets that we'd shot off that last card, we'd probably have a similar average to that. Right, what I'm going to do is quickly move it over, and then we're going to start backing this power off. And I'm hoping that as we bring that power down, we're going to tighten these groups up even more so. Right, target card's moved. I've also just adjusted the power adjuster on here. I've just screwed it in a 1/4 of a turn. Now you'll notice that I'm not chronoing it straight away. Well, it's kind of irrelevant. I'm shooting indoors. Even if I end up at 6-7 foot-pound, it doesn't really matter. But what we do want to do is see whether or not reducing that speed and tighten them groups up slightly. The temperature's dropping all the time. When I get to the club tonight, I'm going to shoot a match card with it, depending on how we get it set up, and I'll take some temperature readings as well. We'll probably chrono it at the club as well. Okay, so this group's going to come in just between the 2 groups that are already down there. Now at the moment that group looks a little bit smaller. Of course it's only 2 pellets. The sample sizes are likely to be too small that we can do in one afternoon filming. But right, just put a fresh card down there. I've also just screwed the power adjuster in now a 1/2 a turn in one go. So we've got 2 1/4 and a 1/2, so we're 1 full revolution in from where we started. What I'm hoping for at this point is just anything obvious happening, just to see whether we're even barking up the correct tree with this rifle. Right. It's interesting because I can see the elevation changing as I'm reducing the power. I can see the point of impact's coming in slightly lower on my reticle. But interesting, there's definitely something going on with the way that this is vibrating at the moment, because the point of impact's quite different to when it was in its stock. How nice would that be if we can just carry on banging them through that? That's a little larger than the pellet itself. Now, we did talk about the various distances and the expected sort of dispersion group sizes that you could expect in the previous video, so I will in the description link the older video because there was quite a lot of cool info there, especially based on the 10 metre target guns, which of course the 9015 is. This is somewhere in the middle. Of course this is a field target rifle but shares quite a lot of similarities. It's the 9015. Come on, don't let me down now. See, I was hoping that we could just save some time, but as is usually the case with air rifles, it's not to be. I mean, let's be fair, that's a beautiful little group, but we need better than that for bench rest if you want to win. So I'm going to move the card across slightly, actually just move the target holder. We'll do a couple more groups exactly as it is now, then we'll pitch it down another half a turn, then we'll stick the chrono on it, and I think what we may have to do after that, stick it back in the stock, because there's a bit of vibration coming through this. It's really weird how the actual point of impact has moved quite a way off of the target dot on the actual scope here. That's got to be barrel vibration related one way or the other in the clamp rig. So right, let's move everything around. Right, okay, I've adjusted the power adjuster in another half a turn, so we're 1.5 turns now in total in from where we started. I've just moved the target card over slightly. Now I've just measured that group. When you're looking at them at 25 mag, they always look a lot bigger than what they generally do when you get down there. It's 6.11 millimeters outside edge to outside edge on the proper card, so actually that's really quite good, but we do want to see if we can tighten it up even more, because of course the better I can get this to group, the more that will make up for my poor technique when I'm shooting the competitions and my elevated heart rate and everything else. So how are we doing for air? Right, we need to top up in a moment. It's actually picked up a little bit. Hopefully you can see the old wind indicator feather there. Obviously I won't be using that indoors. Put it on so we could see what the wind was doing today. Need to give this old girl a clean up, give her a polish and a paint, I think. It's obviously got damp in the barn. Well, that's just torn the card up a little bit, but much the same group size as the last one. What we're going to do quickly, and mark that card up, then we're going to get the chrono on and see where we are power wise, because that temperature is dropping really quick again, so we're going to do another temperature and a quick chrono up and see how we get on, shall we? Yeah, so look, the temperature thermometer 6.1. Right, 6.3, so you can see it's been getting progressively colder. In fact, that just popped up at 5.9, so we're floating around 6 degrees Celsius at the moment. Let's get the old chrono on, shall we? Right, chrono's on. We are now 1.5 full turns in from where we started. The temperature's dropped. We're at 730. 9.3. Right, well, that's interesting. Gives us a baseline to work from on the old power adjuster. It'll be interesting tonight because that temperature should drop a bit more when we get to the club later on. Are we out of air? We're right about to drop off the reg. We might have to call it there for the moment then, because the last thing I really want to be doing right now is to top it up with air. It's going to get quite warm. Obviously the outside temperature is asking for trouble. So what I may have to do is top it up, let it reacclimatise, let the air cylinder cool back down, and then take it to the club this evening. And we'll carry on and see where we are. Right, that'll do. 721, 9 and a bit. Right, let's get a screenshot of all that and stick it on. Right, we're down at 5 degrees, so it's cooled down a bit, but we have refilled her. Let's see whether or not we was already coming off reg at that 730 feet per second. We'll probably find that we can tighten this consistency up. At the moment, all we're doing is throttling down the transfer port. So what we'll probably find is that actually we can take some off of the hammer, remove the hammer tension and open it up again. We may well increase that consistency a little bit better, but bearing in mind how cold it is now, I'm pretty happy with it. We'll leave that as it is at the moment. I'm going to get a card set up. I've got one of my cards on the frame, so the same card that we shot earlier on, I'm going to shoot it off of both bags. And then after that, at the end of the night, I'll get on a detail and shoot a match card and see where we are. All right, let's go. What on earth is that? Right now guys, quick update, there's an awful lot going on here. So at the moment, this was our standard groups, 810 feet per second. Basically all we've been doing is pitching that speed down progressively until we got down to 730 feet per second. You can see that the groups have tightened up marginally. We're down at 6.1, 6.12 millimeters. That's pretty decent groups for what I'm able to shoot. The 9015 actually shoots these particular pellets. The best groups we've had out of that were 5.4 millimeters, so a little bit better with those. But of course, every barrel is always different. I'm hoping to cut corners using these. Of course, I've got 13,000 of these. I don't like using them outdoors, so I really want to try and make them good enough one way or the other so I can use them for the winter comps. We're definitely getting somewhere with them just by reducing the speed. Ultimately, we can probably fine tune this even further. We can probably back the regulator off and do a full new setup running at the slightly slower speeds. But considering all we've done so far is pitch that speed back down a little bit, we've just restricted the transfer port, we are starting to get somewhere. That was the card that I shot outdoors to start with. So that was shot at 810 feet per second. This was shot at 730 feet per second. Now I shot this later on last night at the range. It was pretty cold in there. At this point, the rifle was still cooling down. I got there and the rifle was about 7-8 degrees. It was 4 and a bit degrees in the range. A little bit inconsistent whilst that rifle was cooling down. Now this is why it's so important to acclimatise your rifles throughout the temperature change. If you can leave them outdoors somewhere safe, locked in your shed before a shoot, so they've come down to temperature before you're there, great. I did have this rifle locked in the shed before I went to the club. However, it wasn't quite as cold in the shed here as it was at the range. But either way, we've got a couple more X's, so a marginal improvement over the higher speeds. Not big, but marginal. Hasn't cost anything yet either. But at the end of the day, I shot a practice comp card. Now we've done pretty well with this. You can see there's a few X's in there, not too bad at all. The rifle had cooled down, it had been acclimatised at the 4 degrees for a little while. I'm quite happy. It's nowhere near a PB. My PB is held with the red XTI and the laminate stock. Shot that with JSB shorts, but certainly just this little fine tuning, real first day's worth of tinkering with it. I'm happy how we're progressing, but if I can make the most of these, I'll be happy. Certainly going to save me a lot of money. Going forward, I'm sure that we can find some batches of JSB heavies and the JSB exact shorts that will better this. It's never a good idea just to pick some random pellets and try and make your rifle shoot them well, but that's what we're doing at the moment. I do have something really interesting I need to show you though. Had to leave myself a little note. Hopefully you can see here. We'd set the rifle up outside at 810. We did our clamping, progressively bringing that down, but we'd set the scope up to 0 at 810 feet per second. By the time I got to the range, I was shooting at my 730 feet per second. This is where my point of impacts were dropping. I was aiming here, and then we're dropping here. We've got under half an inch of additional drop by losing 80 feet per second, which is quite incredible. We're always striving for ultra consistent rifles and things like that. Rightly so, we pay good money for them. We want them to be as consistent as physically possible. But if you were getting an unintentional 80 feet per second drop, you're going to have a drastic problem with your rifle. However, that would be easily adjusted out in the scope, adjusting your click charts. But here's the really cool thing. If we were outside shooting this at 730 feet per second, how much more wind drift do you reckon you'd get at 730 feet per second compared to shooting this at 810? Give yourself a 10 mile an hour side wind from the left to the right, say. The additional wind drift by losing 80 feet per second is only just over half a pellet's width, which is incredible. You expect it. From what you hear, people talking about how things get skittish in the wind, you're expecting an extra 3 foot of wind drift, you know, but the reality of it is that it's nowhere near that. Well within our average group sizes. If you were, for instance, HFTing it up or something like that, you probably would never actually notice 80 feet per second difference in terms of the wind drift. You definitely would in the drop, but if you're getting this sort of drop unexpectedly, there's definitely something wrong with your rifle. But it was just, I was super curious. It was great to see it. I've had to actually just plot it into the old ballistic calculator to check it, because I was fairly sure that the drift wasn't going to be much, and sure enough, it really isn't. Indoors or at fixed distance shooting where you know your distances, don't be afraid to try turning these things down. The sight picture feels nicer at the moment. On certain rifles, you drop the power, the triggers are going to be lighter. You don't always have to be pushing for the absolute limit. In fact, in most cases, especially working within a power limit, you're often going to find slight improvements in accuracy and the consistency down range when you do pitch and back from your power limit. So next thing we've got to do, I'm going to do some airstripper testing, because although I've shot a fairly decent card, I want to do better than that. So I'm going to start doing some stripper testing at the club tomorrow. We'll see how we go with that. The stripper cone is set fully out at the moment. I have made no adjustments to that whatsoever. If we can pitch these back a little bit and I can get a couple more X's on a card, I'll be quite happy to use these for my indoor shooting. Then we can save the money for this testing, and we can go and do later, and probably next year now, we'll do some really involved testing with the JSB heavies. We'll buy a load of those in and we can do like a big shoot off of all the batches. So right, I'll see you at the range shortly for some stripper testing. Right, just waiting for my detail to start to get on the 25-yard range. I've adjusted that airstripper in. We've gone back to 2.5mm, which from previous testing on the other XTI seemed to be a pretty good starting point. Had a bit of a funny setup. It started really well at sort of the shorter distances, between 3 and 4mm, and the other one it was a little bit vague, and then it seemed to tighten the groups up again at sort of 4.5. So we're going to start at 2.5, see how it goes, get a couple of groups shot off of both of the bags just to rule out any of my wobbles. It's looking pretty good. It's a lot warmer today as well. I chronoed this before I left home. Still bang on 730 feet per second. It's actually 15, 16 degrees today, so really nice, mild, but wet day. So let's get cracked on, shall we? Right then guys, the results are in. So interestingly, they're pretty much exactly the same as the results we got in the previous airstripper testing last year on the older XTI. The 2mm groups and the 2.5, they're probably the worst of the lot. The 2mm, surprisingly, the same as the last time, was quite tight. As I previously called it before I shot it, the 2.5 to 3.5 is actually pretty poor, and as soon as you start getting back up to the 4 and 4.5mm airstripper settings, the groups start tightening up. Now 4mm appears to certainly give the best groups. I've done quite a lot of testing obviously with the previous one, so that certainly ties in with all of that. However, at this point I'm a little bit disappointed. I would like to have tightened the groups up a little bit further, but what we have established is that it is repeatable, so I've done a bit more shooting off camera. With a sweet spot of around 730 to 760 feet per second, these exacts do give the tightest groups. Now, the 9015 shoots these at 5.5mm, outside edge to outside edge, so marginally tighter. Now, that's what I'm hoping eventually that we can get out of these, which does mean that I'm probably going to have to start looking at pellet prep. Don't forget, throughout all of this testing, these are straight from the tin. They are a known good batch, but there is a little bit of a broad spread on the weight of these. Maybe we'll have to have a look at sizing these. We're definitely going to want to break them down by weight for competitions. So it doesn't always go to plan when you're trying to film these things, but we've had quite a lot of time to experiment in this video here. I've learned quite a bit more about the rifle. We now know the gauge itself is quite well calibrated. Little things like that will just help build a better picture of how your rifle performs. I mean, that was the card that we shot, practice comp card. Certainly not too bad. If I can do that in competition, maybe pitch in a couple more X's here, I'll actually be quite happy. So next thing, it's going to be a video in itself, actually pellet prep. We'll probably do some pellet sizing prep, how I break them down by weight and everything else, and that's definitely enough content there for a full video. I've also started documenting my entry into the bench rest, but I certainly need to up my accuracy and my precision, because I don't think I'm going to win with a card like that just yet. So that'll do it for this one, guys. I will catch you in the next one.